time for my daily exercise. This is my view of Amsterdam from my front door where I'm staying. Very, very quiet. Got some bikers down there, of course. Going to be seeing a lot of them as I take you with me on my walkies. Daily walkies. Daily walkies, Dutch style. Get in the lift. Exercise time. I've been cooped up all day doing emails, doing client stuff, and now I'm going to wander to Norder Park and see what I can see, and then going to have a chat with you guys when I get there about altar stuff, as you can see from the title. Sweet, sweet freedom. So quiet. Usually this street is really quite full of traffic, but it is so quiet today. It's COVID quiet, if you get me. I'm just about to go into Norder Park now, like a painting, and also all I can smell is really nice, some sort of really nice kush. I actually don't smoke, but somebody is. Somebody is enjoying some on this charming summer's day. I am now in Norder Park. This will be my space of devotion and reflection while I talk to you about spaces of devotion and reflection. This video is not just going to be connected to the situation going on with COVID-19 and staying in and that kind of thing, but it's also just going to be in general. So long after COVID-19 is all over, I'm hoping that this will still be relevant. Okay, doll faces, I'm going to attempt to talk and walk without falling in to any of these waterways that I've been so abundantly blessed with here in the dam. Yeah, so altar spaces, reflection spaces, places that you can go to pray, to contemplate, to gather your power, to gather your energy. My feeling is that during this very strange time in the human story, there are going to be a lot of people that are coming back to the idea of reflection spaces, shrines, altars, meditation spaces, places of power in the home, who may have fallen away from that kind of idea for a while, or might have certain spaces that they were previously using that they're just no longer using, you know? And actually this time may have urged them to come back to that sort of thing. So that's why I want to talk about that sort of topic today, is to give people all the inspiration that they might need, different thoughts about how to set up temporary spaces of that nature, which is really important because not everybody has like the space to do things on a big scale, and not everybody has the inclination to keep their spaces like in the long term, you know. So this is a cathedral. To me, this is a cathedral. Anything like this feels to me like church. And I'm sure there's going to be so many people watching this who actually get exactly what I mean. You know, you've got the whole same vibe as when you walk into a church. You know, you've got the doorway, you've got the arches, and there's a sacred feeling when you walk in, and there's a feeling of reverence, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So anything like this that you can have, to me, is very cathedral-like. However, I also think that there is a danger when we talk about things like that we're going to forget that urban landscapes and urban structures and urban energy can also be sacred, and it can also be something that a lot of people actually prefer. They actually sort of prefer it to rural structures in a sense. So I think that too, you know, like that when you are in a rural like place, then you think about that as being, let's say, superior sometimes. I think a lot of people in witchcraft and paganism, they do talk about rural spaces and green spaces being places of reverence and places where you can really connect, and there's no doubt that that's a fact. I do think also though that there's a lot of city witches about who would say that there's plenty of beautiful opportunities for them to do a similar sort of thing when they walk through the incredible, like hectic, juxtaposing, clashing energies of the old cities, and all of the vibes of old and new coming together, and all of the different threads of our collective story coming together, weaving this very vibrant, chaotic tapestry. That's also something that happens, and that's something that we need not to overlook. I have often liked the idea of setting up an altar on something like this, like a cut tree, and I really like the fact that this is like a 2-tier altar. So this is something that could be set up temporarily in a natural space, and this is something I've done a few times in my witchy life, and it looks amazing and it feels amazing. So if you've got something like this around in your space, and you feel like it's going to be reasonably quiet, reasonably like comfortable to do it for a while, to have a temporary structure on there, even if it's just a tea light, then you can do that if you want to. You might even have something like that on your own land or in your own garden, which is lucky. If not, then you can use like you know, a piece of stone that you find that's flat and nice to use, you know, and you can put that in your garden or in a rural space for a while, or just in any area where you feel like you get a good energy and there's a good vibe. If you are returning to having an altar space, having a space for reflection, anything like that, a place of power in your home or in your garden, and it's been a while since you have had anything like that, then you might want to reflect back on what you were doing before that was working, what you had on that space that was working and why. But also be honest with yourself about what you were doing that was just basically your version of going through the motions. So there might have been things that you were, let's say, placing onto your space because you saw other people doing it, or you felt like they had to be included. Like maybe you were following Wiccan resources and you thought that you needed to have a chalice and you needed to have a wand, or you needed to have an athame or whatever it might be. Or maybe you just felt like you had to have certain things like crystals or flowers or candles or whatever it is that you saw witches on Instagram having. It's really, I think, a valuable and potent space to be in when you're at a point on your journey where you can really come back to the notion of having an altar or a sacred space and say to yourself, okay, what do I want on it for me? What's important to me about having this space? And what do I need to make sure I'm not just putting on there because I'm going through the motions, or I think it's what I should have on there or whatever. The reality is that you might have moved on quite a bit from where you were when you first decided you were going to have an altar or a sacred space of some kind, a reflection space, a shrine, or a number of shrines. You might decide, as you are coming back to the idea of wanting to work with an altar space, that you want to expand, you want to have more than one space. Maybe it got too fiddly for you in the past and you had tons of altar spaces and tons of little separate shrines, and maybe you know that you want to do things in less of a complicated way this time. So for some people that are coming back to it or just focusing on how important it is, it's going to be about you know, downsizing, and for other people it's going to be about expanding and letting yourself have more, letting yourself maybe have more space dedicated to it, having a bigger altar setup. Now, obviously, it doesn't always have to be a permanent setup, as I was just explaining. You absolutely can go for something temporary. You can, every time you want to have an altar or a shrine, a space where you reflect, you can have a cloth that you put down. It can be like a decorative tea towel or a little altar cloth that you have, or maybe just like a nice silk scarf that you put down. And you can lay that down on the floor. You can put your bits and pieces on top of it, whether you just want to have something as simple as a tea light and a tarot card. You can just put that down on it, and then when you're done with it, you can wrap it all up, pack it all up, put it away. There are lots of people who like a temporary setup, or they need to have a temporary setup because they don't have the room in their space, or they don't live with people who are supportive of their path, and they will usually have the bits and pieces that they want with the altar cloth that they use in a shoebox or something of that nature, and they will leave the shoebox underneath the bed or out of the way in the back of the wardrobe. And when they have the opportunity, so whether it's an esbat or a sabbat, or they just feel the need to have a space in front of them where they have a collection of things to reflect upon, when that opportunity comes, they can quickly get the box out, they can freely and readily access the bits and pieces inside that box, and then they can put everything away quickly. If you know you're in a situation where that might be the useful thing for you, then I would definitely recommend that. It's good to have your bits and pieces in one space together in a box, and then have that ready access to them. If you've actually never had an altar before, or a reflection space, anything like that where you keep bits and pieces that are related to your spiritual journey, then you might want to start really small and really simple. And I think that now is a really great time to think about boiling things down, stripping things back, being as simple as you can be. I just feel like there's very much the mood for that at the moment, with the present situation being what it is, and us not having, you know, plentiful sort of shops to go into and knickknacks to look at and bits and pieces to imagine that we need when actually we don't need them at all. So sometimes it can be as simple as, if you've got a deck of tarot cards, grabbing the key card that reflects how you want to feel, or what you want to bring in, what you want to manifest, what you want to meditate on. Just get that card, grab a tea light if you want it, or a stick of incense if you have it, but it doesn't even have to be that. It can literally just be the card in front of you, and you can meditate on that card, you can path work with that card, you can visualize with that card, you can speak words of power over that card. And that can be just your little reflection space. It literally has to be that simple and quick and easy, quick and dirty, if that's what you've got at your disposal. Especially if you're only just coming back to it, or you've never had one before. You're not going to want to go and get loads of bits and risk actually not being inspired by those bits and pieces and feeling like you kind of wish you hadn't bought them in the end. I would definitely say, don't forget that if I'm saying things like tarot card, crystal, candle, and you're thinking none of this means anything to me, I'm not inspired by that kind of thing, that kind of thing doesn't make me feel like it's going to be useful for me, then don't worry about it. Like, there's going to be loads of other things that you can put on your altar space. If you have an altar space right now, if you have any kind of permanent shrine, any kind of permanent reflection space, and you know that you need to declutter, you need to simplify, do that. Take this time to really do that. Think about everything that you've got on your altar. Do you need it? Does it make you feel fizzy? Does it make you buzz? Does it excite you? Does it give you any ideas? Is it reflective of who you are now as a practitioner? And if so, why? The things that you have on your space, though, do not necessarily need to be things that you use. They do not necessarily need to be really old things that you've had for a very, very long time. They do not necessarily need to be things that you could easily explain the meaning of to someone else, right? So that's something that I will say that I think is important to mention and touch on. The things that have meaning for you have meaning for you. And there is no burden of proof upon you to try to impress upon someone else why that thing needs to be on your altar. If it feels right for you, for your permanent or temporary altar or reflection space, put it on there. It's really only got to work for you, and it's got to feel fizzy for you, and everybody else basically be damned. You know, you are the practitioner, you're the person that gets to sign off on anything that you will or will not put on your reflection space. And that would be true no matter what the state of permanence for that reflection space was going to be. It could be a permanent altar, it could be literally a reflection space that you're setting up for like half an hour quickly to do something. Whatever you put on there has to have meaning and potency for you. It might be something that you only just found on the beach or in the forest or on the street. It might be something that you printed off from your computer because you found it on a Pinterest board and it just really spoke to what you are and who you are or what you're trying to do. Of course, it might often be something with loads of sentimental value that's very, very old, that has a very clear reason and a very widely understandable reason for its inclusion. But there might be many times where you just want to include something, and you know what? Just include it. Include it because it makes you feel potent. Include it because it connects you with your witchhood. And don't worry about how you would explain it to an outside audience. Some people have big, flowery, permanent altars. And by flowery, I mean there's a lot of shit on them. There's a lot of stuff on them. There's a lot of different sections to them. Some people have multiple altars, multiple shrines. Just because you may not be able to have those things does not mean that you are any less of a practitioner. It does not mean that you have any less of the degree of potency of somebody who has the space for that stuff, the money for that stuff, the freedom for that stuff, whatever it might be. It could be a combination of all of those things. Never, ever, ever belittle yourself by telling yourself that you have to have that stuff to make it fly and to make it pop, because you simply do not. And I think that most people watching this will know anyway that that is just a lie that we often tell ourselves to get in our own way, to sabotage our own progress. I think we have a fear of seeing what we're really capable of achieving without any of that stuff. You might literally have an altar that is packed away inside a tobacco tin, and inside that tobacco tin it has a shred of altar cloth and like a little tiny crystal and a little toy from your childhood that connects you with a really special place that you like to go to in your imagination when you're doing magic. And that might be it. You might have a tin with just like one tea light in it and a piece of your great grandmother's jewelry, and you know whatever you have in your little tin, and that might be it. That might be the extent of your magical materials and objects in the world. And then you might go onto Instagram and you might see somebody who's got like 2 working altars and a shrine to a saint that they work with, and they've got 150 decks. If you know that looking at that kind of visual stimulation and having access to that part of other witches' lives just makes you feel crappy and down on yourself and like you're not capable of having the degree of potency and proficiency that they do because you haven't got the stuff, I would say stop watching those things. Stop accessing those hashtags on Instagram. Stop looking at that kind of information and using it against yourself and convincing yourself that you don't have the minerals because you don't have the materials. You know, that's not true, okay? Having the heart of the witch has got nothing to do with having all the bells and whistles and the stuff, you know? And I know that people have said that many times in many ways, but I think it can always stand to be said again. Don't forget that if you are not necessarily in a place of safety right now in your life to be able to own witchy bits and pieces, then you're going to want to have bits and pieces that are more neutral in their flavour anyway. So you're going to want to have things that have some sort of dual purpose, or things that if they were found could be you know, neutralized in a sense. Now obviously the dream is for everybody to be as far out of the witchy broom closet as possible if they want to be, but that's not the reality for everybody. So again, if you are not safe to do so, if you're not in a place in your life where you can be honest and open about your spirituality, then you're going to want to have things that can be easily packed away, easily stored, easily explained, easily maybe even used for some other purpose. And that doesn't make you any less of a witch. Don't you dare believe it for a second. Another thing is that even if you are comfortable with your witchhood and people around you know about it, or you are free to talk about it, or you're free to have a witchy space in your home, you may not want to. That also doesn't make you any less of a practitioner. If you want to have something that is very temporary, something that, like I said, you put in a tin or you put in a shoebox or whatever, and you just take it out for the specific times when you need to have those things around you, and then you put them away, fine, then you're the kind of witch that doesn't want a permanent altar. Not all witches want to have a permanent altar, and I think that's something I don't see being said a lot, so I want to put that in there as well. You're not obligated to want this great big thing that is a permanent fixture in your home. You're not obligated to see that as something that you are supposed to be heading towards, something that you are supposed to be thinking of as a goal. You don't have to think of that as a goal if you don't want to. Maybe you want your space for other things. Maybe you don't want to constantly have an altar on show all of the time. Maybe you feel like you don't practice enough to make that into something that you need in your reality. And that's also perfectly allowed. If you're on a budget when it comes to your altars, reflection spaces, things like that, witchy bits and pieces, I would say don't torture yourself by looking at these big grandiose setups that other people have got. Be aware that the cosmos provides a lot of things for you. Be on the lookout for those things when you're in settings, wherever they might chance to be. They could be in the forest where you go for a walk. They could be in the beach where you go for a walk. They could be in a charity shop in the middle of your city where you go, you know, a flea market, like a garage sale, whatever. You know, you might find them at a friend's house who's getting rid of some things. You might find them on the internet and just think, oh, that would be good for a printout, or maybe I could draw my own picture of it or whatever. Don't torture yourself with pricey setups if you know that's not something that you can do for yourself. There's lots of ways that you can collect really meaningful things together for little or no money. There's so much creativity in looking at what you've already got lying around, looking at what you might be able to see in a different light and think, wow, I've never really seen this object in a witchy context before. I've never really seen the magic and the majesty of this object before. I've never looked at it like that. How amazing that I'm now giving myself this opportunity to do so. And then it is given a new life. It's given a new incarnation for you. There are so many things that are transferable tools. Obviously, you can use a cup or a glass from your kitchen. You might choose to use a candle holder that is for dinner parties for your temporary altar setup. You might use a fancy picture frame that's usually got a family photo in it, and you might instead frame a tarot card and put the tarot card in there, or frame an image of a goddess and put that in there, and then, you know, light the tea light and have like a midnight vigil or a moonlight vigil, or have a sabbat that's based around that, and then the picture frame gets put back into its original kind of more mundane context the next day. There's loads of different things that you will use for multiple purposes. For me, I have a lot of jewellery that I use for magical purposes, but also for non-magical purposes. I have a lot of things that I like to wear that I see as having a witchy meaning or a witchy usage, but also having non-witchy uses as well. Going back to what I was saying about how you don't need to actually be using everything that is on your altar or on your reflection space, what I meant by that was that some things are just going to be decorative, ornamental. They're going to remind you of something, they're going to tap you into something, but they're not necessarily going to be working tools for you as a witch, and that's fine. Sometimes a reflection space is just that. It is a reflection space. That doesn't make it into a dead space per se. just because you're not going to be doing workings, you're not going to be actually taking any actions with those things. Those things are just there to remind you of something, to tap you into something, to give you that sense of power that you want, or that sense of peace that you want, or whatever it might be. And so they are cues that give you that visual reminder of what it is that you're manifesting into your reality. You are using those things in a way, but certainly you're not going to be moving them around. You're not going through anything ritualistic with them. They just happen to be there, and you are just reflecting on them and just sort of like using them to inspire you, basically. A lot of stuff is just going to be symbolic. It's not necessarily going to be a working altar, and that's absolutely fine. And in fact, I think for a lot of people, a reflection space, whether it's permanent or whether it's temporary, is a really good place to just journal, cry, think, speak out loud, write really important messages on WhatsApp or email that you have to write, that you've been kind of gearing up to, make playlists. There's loads of amazing things that you can sit and do at a place which is essentially more for reflection than it is for workings. So the things on the reflection space may remain static, they may not be used necessarily, they may only be for inspiration, but they are touchstones to help you with whatever you might do in front of that reflection space, and that is where the real work is being done. My altar at home is actually sort of half and half, really. You've got the cards on there, which are used. There's lotions and potions on there. There's oils. Those things are used. I've got a glass sort of tabletop at the front where I do my card readings and sometimes do spellcraft, or I do cauldron work. You've got a cauldron on there. That is used. I've got a crystal ball. That's used. But the things at the back, there's lots of statuettes. There's a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mother. There's a couple of statues, actually, of the Blessed Virgin Mother. There's a couple of statues of hell. There is an image of Joan of Arc. There's lots of jewelry draped over a mirror. Those things are not necessarily used. They are touchstones. They are visual stimulation. They are reminders for reflection and meditation and devotion, but I do not use them. I don't move them around. I don't interact with them as objects per se. So it's like half working altar, half reflection space for me. And of course, the more temporary your space is, the more you're going to have to really zoom into what you want it for. Is it going to be for a working, or is it going to be for reflection? If it's only going to be up for a few days, it might be both, and you might want to have the reflection stuff at the back and then the space for the working at the front. If you're going to be getting down and dirty for a 20-minute magical working and you want to just throw the altar cloth down and do what you've got to do, you can just do that. If you do want to have something permanent, if you do want to have a permanent space for reflection, or a permanent working altar, don't let that pressure you. Don't let it pressure you to go there every single day or do something every single day. For a lot of people, it's useful to have something that is permanent, that's always there, because it reminds them that they always can go to it and do something. But I do think at the same time, it's fine to just sit there and have your cup of tea there in the morning. It's fine to have it just to remind you of your intention to be more witchy in your everyday reality. You don't always have to be doing big workings there. You don't always have to be planning to do something there. Finally, darlings, always try and remember that you can create an altar in your imagination. You can visualize your perfect altar, or even a bunch of perfect altars, and you can put everything on there that your witchy heart desires. You can actually draw out a plan of the altar that you imagine, and then close your eyes, or if you don't like to visualize with your eyes closed, keep your eyes open and actually really get the image of that altar in mind and feel like you're really sitting in front of it, and imagine yourself doing workings at it. Imagine yourself reflecting on the things that you have on there. You can change it up as many times as you like. You can make it as flowery as you want to. And it might be that you actually want to do the over the top, really flowery, really ostentatious stuff in your mind and in your mind's eye. And then you might want something much more pared down and simple for your actual reality and for your budget, or for your space, or for just what you need that is practical for your issues and for your requirements. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you coming with me on this little journey to talk about how we can have the altars and the reflection spaces that matter to us, that are meaningful to us, and that work for us. Please leave your ideas and comments down below. Please let us know what you do, what you don't do, what you used to do, what you do now, what you would recommend for others, and how you feel about altars, shrines, and spaces of reflection and intention. Much witchy love as always, darlings. Blessed be. Guys, this isn't practicing social distancing now, is it? Hey? Come on, you lot, break it up.